when a man says your name in that moment, you felt it differently, didn't you? Not like when he says it across a dinner table, not like when he texts it at the start of a message. Something about it in that moment hit you somewhere deep, and you've been turning it over in your mind ever since, wondering what it meant, wondering if it meant anything, wondering if you're reading too much into it or not nearly enough. Most women never get a straight answer to this question. They ask their friends, they scroll through forums at midnight, they get 100 different opinions and walk away more confused than when they started. But by the end of this video, you will know exactly what it means when a man says your name in those intimate moments, what it reveals about his emotional state, what it says about where you stand in his mind, and the one signal that separates a man who is genuinely falling for you from a man who is simply caught up in the moment. Stay with me. This one matters. Here's the thing about intimacy. It strips everything away. All the carefully constructed walls that people build, the confidence, the coolness, the careful management of how they come across. In those vulnerable moments, those walls come down. And what comes out in those moments? That's the real person. That's the unfiltered truth. So when something specific happens, like him saying your name, you're right to pay attention. Your instincts are telling you this is data, and they're correct. But here's the struggle I see in so many women. You've been in situations before where you felt something was significant, where you felt a man was telling you something through his behavior, and you either dismissed it because you didn't want to seem too much, or you convinced yourself it meant more than it did because you wanted it to be true. And both of those roads have hurt you before. You've been burned by overreading, and you've been burned by underreading. And now you're standing at this crossroads again, trying to figure out which mistake not to make this time. I want to give you a different framework entirely. Not does this mean he loves me versus does this mean nothing. I want to give you a nuanced, emotionally intelligent read on what different versions of this moment actually mean. Because not all name saying is created equal. And the difference between them will tell you more about where this relationship is going than almost anything else he could do. Let's go through the 7 reasons, and I promise you, by number 4, something is going to click for you that you won't be able to unhear. Let's start with the most fundamental truth about why humans say names in general. Names are an act of specificity. When you say someone's name, you are on a neurological level directing your full attention to that specific person. You are cutting through the noise of everything else and saying you. Not someone, not anyone, you. In the context of physical intimacy, this matters enormously. Because physical intimacy, if a person lets it, can become an almost anonymous experience. The body takes over, the mind can drift. Some people, frankly, are not fully present with their partner. They're in their own head, in their own experience. And that's more common than anyone admits. When he says your name, he is fighting against that drift. He is actively pulling himself back into the room with you. He is, in the most literal sense, saying, I know who I am with right now, and I want to be here with this person. Think about a time you were in a crowded, noisy restaurant and someone called your name across the room. Everything else fell away for a second, didn't it? That's what names do. They cut through, they focus, they ground. So when a man says your name in an intimate moment, the very first thing it signals is that he is grounded in you, not lost in sensation, not somewhere else in his head, present, anchored here. A man who says your name during intimacy is choosing presence over escape. And that choice is never accidental. But here's where it gets interesting. This one might genuinely surprise you. The way a person behaves during intimacy is not created in that moment. It is an expression of patterns that already exist in how they think, feel, and relate to you in every other context. Intimacy doesn't create emotional reality. It reveals it. So when a man says your name in that context, it tells you something about how you exist in his mind when you're not there. It tells you that you are a fully realized person to him, not a body, not a fantasy, not a role. You are Sarah or Emma or whoever you are, a whole, specific, individual human being who he carries in his mind with a name attached. This seems obvious, but it's not. Think about how many situationships and confusing almost relationships are characterized by a man who is physically present, but mentally treats you as interchangeable, as available, as the woman I see on Thursdays. He might enjoy you tremendously. He might even be affectionate. But there's a flatness to how he relates to you. Like you don't quite have edges, like you're slightly blurry to him. A man who says your name unprompted, spontaneously, in a moment when his guard is completely down, he sees you clearly. You have edges. You're in focus. You exist to him as a full person, even when his own experience could justify making everything about himself. Picture this. Sarah has been seeing David for 2 months. He's attentive, he texts back, he makes plans, but she can't tell if she matters or if she's just convenient. Then one evening, in a completely unguarded moment, he whispers her name. Not dramatically, just her name, like it escaped him. And Sarah felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't been able to settle with any amount of reassuring texts. Because she understood he doesn't just enjoy her company, he sees her. When a man says your name with his walls completely down, he is showing you the shape of how you exist in his interior world. And that shape is full, clear, and real. Now, this next one might surprise you. I need to be honest with you about something here because I think you deserve the full picture, not just the romantic version. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a man saying your name in those moments is less about deep emotional connection and more about a primal, subconscious act of claiming. There is a dimension of intimacy that is inherently territorial in human psychology. Not in a sinister way necessarily, just in a very ancient, hardwired way. Saying your name can be a man's way of saying, mine. In that moment, with those walls down and that vulnerability exposed, the name is almost a flag planted, an assertion. Now, why does this matter to you? Because possession without connection is hollow. And you need to be able to tell the difference. Here's how you do it. Watch what happens after. A man whose name saying comes from genuine emotional investment, he doesn't change after intimacy. He stays warm. He stays engaged. he pulls you closer. The name he said in that moment is consistent with how he talks to you, treats you, sees you when you're both fully clothed and navigating the ordinary world. But a man whose name saying comes from that territorial, in-the-moment instinct, there can be a subtle shift afterward, a slight pulling back, a return to distance, because the moment passed, the instinct faded, and what remains is whatever was actually there to begin with. Think about that for a second. The aftermath is the answer key. One woman I know, let's call her Claire, told me that a man she'd been seeing said her name constantly during intimate moments. She was thrilled. She thought it meant she was special to him. But she noticed that every single time, within an hour of that intimacy ending, he became almost a different person. Less warm, more distracted. She felt like she'd been turned on and then turned off. The name meant something, but it meant that moment, not her as a person across time. Contrast that with the man who says your name in those moments and then 3 days later uses it again, softly, in passing, when he's trying to get your attention across a room. That's the same feeling, just in a different context. That's continuity. That's character. The most important question is not whether he says your name. It's whether the man who says it in that vulnerable moment is the same man who shows up for you in every other moment. And if you think that was powerful, wait for this. Here is something that most people, most men, will never tell you. Vulnerability is terrifying for men. Not because they're weak, precisely because they care so much about appearing strong. From the time they're small boys, they are conditioned by fathers, by peers, by culture, to keep the emotional parts of themselves hidden, to be the rock, to not need, to not lean. And then there are moments, like the one we're talking about, where the conditioning falls away, where something slips out that he didn't plan. Saying your name in that moment is, for many men, an act of emotional courage that they don't even consciously recognize as courage. They didn't decide to do it. It just came out. Because the emotion attached to you, the care, the tenderness, the feeling he has when he looks at you, was bigger in that moment than his habit of keeping himself guarded. This is rare. I want you to understand how rare this is. Many men can engage in physical intimacy with very little emotional exposure. They've learned to compartmentalize so effectively that their heart stays safe even when their body is completely present. And they will never ever say a name in those moments because a name is too specific, too intimate, too revealing. A name is an admission that you are the person, not a person, the person. When a man's name for you escapes him in an unguarded moment, you are watching a man whose feelings for you outran his defenses. And that, in a world where men are socialized to treat emotional openness as weakness, is genuinely remarkable. Imagine a man, quiet type, not given to big declarations, the kind of guy whose friends have never once heard him talk about his feelings. He's been with this woman for 4 months, never said "I like you" directly, showed it in 100 small ways, but never said it. And then one night, in a moment of complete vulnerability, he says her name like it was the only word he knew. And she understood in that instant what 4 months of small gestures had been trying to tell her. He didn't have to say, "I love you." Her name, said like that, was the whole sentence. When a guarded man says your name in his most vulnerable moment, you are not hearing a slip of the tongue. You are hearing a man whose feelings became bigger than his fear. Let's keep going because it only gets deeper from here. There's a fascinating layer to this that most people miss entirely. Saying your name in an intimate moment is not just an inward act. It's an outward one. It's not just him processing his own feelings. It's a communication. It's directed at you. He is, consciously or not, making sure that you know that he knows who he's with. Think about what that means. He wants you to feel seen. He wants you to feel specific. He wants you to know that in this moment, when everything is stripped back and the ordinary armor of life is gone, he is here, fully with you. This is fundamentally different from a man who stays silent or who makes intimate moments feel slightly generic, slightly interchangeable. There's a kind of man who can go through the motions of closeness without ever making you feel like you are the point of it, like you could be swapped out and he wouldn't fundamentally notice. Those interactions leave you feeling warm in your body, but strangely cold in your heart. When a man says your name, he's closing that gap. He's saying, this is not generic. This is not habit. This is not just what I do. This is you and me. And I need you to know that I know that. And there is something extraordinarily nourishing about being seen in that way. Not performed at, not entertained, not desired in the abstract, but known. Known by name, known specifically, known precisely. One thing I always tell women, watch how a man says your name across all contexts. Does he say it with lightness when he's teasing you? Does he say it firmly when he needs your attention? Does it soften when he's being kind? And does it appear raw and unplanned in those moments of real closeness? Because the name itself stays the same, but the emotional texture he wraps around it tells you everything about where you are in his heart. A man who says your name intimately isn't just revealing how he feels, he's actively trying to make sure you feel the significance of that moment. He wants you to know you're not invisible to him. Now, this next one is something almost no one talks about. I don't want you to walk away from this video with a simple, clean checklist that gets you into trouble. Because the truth, as much as I wish it were simpler, is nuanced. And you are smart enough to handle nuance. Not all name saying is equal. The how carries as much meaning as the what. There's a soft whisper of a name, almost reverent, like he's saying something sacred. That tone typically comes from tenderness, from care that is sitting very close to the surface, from a man who, in that moment, feels something like awe about the fact that you're there with him. There's a name said with urgency, like an anchor being thrown into the water during a storm. That's a man using your name to tether himself to something real. It can signal intense emotion, deep engagement, even a kind of overwhelm at his own feelings. And there's a name said performatively, said because he thinks it's what he should do, or because he's read that women like it, or because it's become a habit in his intimate encounters. And this version, I'll be honest, tends to feel slightly rehearsed, like a line that's been delivered before. You can usually feel the difference, not always immediately, but if you pay attention, there's a flatness to performance that genuine emotion doesn't have. Here's a practical test. Does the way he says your name in those intimate moments match the emotional register he operates in outside those moments? If he is warm, attentive, and present with you generally, and the name he says feels like an extension of that, trust it. If he's emotionally cool in everyday life, but suddenly switches to deeply emotive name using in intimate moments only, be curious about that gap. It doesn't necessarily mean something bad, but it's worth understanding. The human voice, when stripped of its performance, tells you what the human heart is carrying. And when he says your name with genuine feeling, you will know it in your body before your brain has a chance to explain it. Trust what his tone feels like before you trust what the moment looks like. Genuine emotion has a texture that performance can never quite replicate. And finally, the one that ties everything together. Here is the most important thing I want you to take away from this entire video. The man who says your name in a moment of complete vulnerability, who reaches for you specifically, who anchors himself in you, who lets something true escape his carefully maintained composure. That man is showing you a glimpse of his most emotionally available self. The version of him that exists when he's not managing how he comes across. The version that hasn't yet been convinced by his own defenses that needing someone is dangerous. And that version of him, that version is capable. Capable of real intimacy. Capable of real love. Capable of the kind of connection that doesn't just feel good in the moment, but builds something over time. But, and this is important, a glimpse is not a guarantee. What you do with that information and what he does with it matters enormously. Some men catch themselves in those moments of openness and immediately begin to close back up. They get scared. They retreat. They tell themselves they're not ready, not the right person, not in a place in their life, and they let that glimpse of their best self become a one-time occurrence rather than a direction of travel. Your job, and I say this with enormous care, is not to pull that open version of him out against his will. You cannot build a relationship by working harder than the other person to sustain their own emotional availability. You would exhaust yourself. What you can do is be someone who makes it safe for that version of him to stay. Not by shrinking yourself, not by making yourself easy, but by being so genuinely, warmly, unapologetically yourself, with your standards, your care, your presence, that he finds himself wanting to remain open. Because being open with you feels better than being closed. Think about the most extraordinary love stories, not the fictional ones, the real ones, the ones you've seen in people you admire. They are almost always stories about two people who brought out the best, most open, most courageous version of each other. Not because they tried to fix each other, but because they created a climate through kindness, through honesty, through not accepting less than they deserved, in which both of them grew. That's what you're building toward. That's what that name, whispered or said fiercely or escaping him without a plan is pointing at. A man who is capable of being fully present with another person. A man whose feelings become bigger than his fear. A man who reaches for you by name, specifically you, in the moments when who he really is gets to come through. A moment of vulnerability is a man showing you who he can be. Whether he chooses to become that man consistently for you is the question only the next chapter of his behavior will answer. Let's bring this all the way home. In the last 20-something minutes, we've gone through 7 layers of what it really means when a man says your name in those intimate, unguarded moments. We talked about how it's an act of presence, a man anchoring himself in you rather than drifting into the impersonal. We talked about how it reveals the shape of how you exist in his mind when you're not in the room. We talked about the complicated reality of possession versus connection and why the aftermath is the real answer key. We talked about the emotional courage it takes, especially for men who've been taught to keep themselves hidden, for something that honest to slip out. We talked about how it's a message directed at you, a man wanting you to feel known. We talked about reading tone and texture, not just the fact of it. And finally, we talked about what it previews, the version of a man who is capable of full, genuine, enduring intimacy. Here is what I want you to hold on to above all else. You deserve to be with someone for whom you are not interchangeable. You deserve someone who, even in the moments when they could make everything about themselves, makes it about you. Someone who says your name like it means something. Someone who sees you specifically, fully, clearly, not just in the easy moments, but in the real ones. The fact that you're here, thinking carefully about what these moments mean, asking the right questions, refusing to settle for confusion when clarity is possible, that tells me everything about the quality of love you are capable of giving. And people who are capable of giving that quality of love, they deserve to receive it in kind. Don't spend another year of your life in a situation that keeps you guessing. Don't silence the part of you that knows the difference between a man who is all the way in and a man who is keeping his options carefully open. Your instincts are good. Your standards are not too high. Your desire to be truly known by the person you're closest to is not needy. It is human, it is healthy, and it is right. The relationship you're imagining, the one where you are seen, where you are chosen, where someone says your name like you are the whole point, that relationship is not a fantasy. It exists. It is available to you. But it starts with you deciding right now that you will not accept a version of love that asks you to make yourself smaller to fit inside it. This is your moment. Don't waste it. If this video spoke to something real in you, if it helped you see your situation more clearly, then hit subscribe right now because we release content like this every single week. And watch this next video. If he does this before sex, he sees you as more than just casual, because everything we talked about today connects directly to what you'll learn there. I'll see you in the next one.